Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fourth webinar on the EUI Global Executive Master. My name is George Papaconstantinou. I am the EUI Dean for Executive Education, and I'm here together with a number of our professors who will be teaching the core courses of the Executive Masters, and together with Guy Bettinelli, who is a program coordinator for our EUI Executive Master. We're coming to you from Palazzo Buontalenti, the headquarters of the School of Transnational Governance in downtown Florence, on what is unfortunately a rainy day. So in this fourth webinar, we see in terms of participants, a number of you who have been to some of our previous webinars. Some people have already applied, some who have already been accepted, others who are still thinking about it, and some people who have not been to a previous webinar. So I'm going to start with a broad introduction to what I will be doing. I'm going to do an overview of the GEM program, and then we're going to move to presentation of the core modules, and after that, we will move to a Q&A. So let me just remind everyone what this program is about. The GEM is an executive degree. It's an executive master's degree in public policy with a global outlook. We think that it is taught by world-class faculty and practitioners who bring together an excellent academic background, but also expertise on the ground of policymaking. We're focusing on cutting-edge policy issues from energy regulation to climate finance, AI and governance, economics, geopolitics, and security. And our target group is mid-career policy professionals, and you could be working in the public sector, in international organizations, in the private sector, looking at the public sector, as well as in civil society. And indeed, we have applications and people are interested from all of these different groups. And you would also be interested in a peer learning and a blended learning approach, because this is a program that is part-time. It is addressed to policy professionals who work while they learn, and you spend about 2 weeks every year in Florence over the 2-year period in which this program is taught. There are 4 building blocks. The core modules that we'll be talking about today, these are required for all EUI GEM candidates, participants. Then we have the professional development. These are shorter skill development courses and workshops. We had a webinar on this some weeks ago where we explained the different nature of each of these modules. Then we have elective modules. These are chosen from 4 different specialization fields. Again, we have had one webinar focusing exactly on that and discussing what these fields are, what kind of courses we're going to be offering in each of these fields. And finally, capstone. And the capstone is important to us because this is related to the candidate's professional journey. So the organization in which you're working, or a particular theme that you happen to be professionally involved in. And this is something that you can bring back to the organization from which you come, or to advance in a particular area. Now, from these 4 building blocks to the structure and model that we have. Here you see the core modules that we will be talking about today. Applied political science, economics for policymakers, business and government, and big data, big and smart data analytics. These are the 4 core modules. That's what we're going to be spending our webinar today discussing. But aside from that, we have our professional development shorter skill courses, and these are effective management, ethical leadership, policy communication, responsible negotiations, strategic foresight, inclusivity and gender mainstreaming, as well as some executive study visits, which are in Brussels, here in Florence at the EUI State of the Union, but also our global challenge to a country that we will divulge later on when people arrive here. And that's the part of the program that is actually optional, the global challenge. And in addition to the core module and the professional development modules, we have four particular specialization tracks. The energy and climate track, with courses on energy markets and regulations, on getting to net zero and climate neutral and smart cities. The economy and finance track, with a module on current issues in political economy, in international political economy, on digital finance, from technology to regulation, and sustainable finance and climate risk. So the cutting edge issues in economy and finance. Tech and governance, where we're going to be looking at regulation and competition in the digital era, artificial intelligence and governance, and innovation in the digital economy. And finally, geopolitics and security, with a course on transnational governance and global policy making, one on global security architecture, and one on international trade and diplomacy. So this is the structure of the GEM. Some of you have heard this before because you've been to one of our previous seminars. What you have not heard before is a deeper dive that we're going to be doing here on our core modules. And we're going to start with the first one, which is applied political science. And I'm going to give the floor to Simon Hicks, who's a professor of comparative politics at EUI. Simon.
Thanks, George. Hello to everybody there. So let me just do a few-minute introduction to the core module that I'm going to be teaching, which we're calling Applied Political Science. So this module builds on my experience of teaching a very similar course on the London School of Economics Executive Masters in Public Policy, and also my own experience of research and interacting with politics and policymakers throughout my career as a political scientist. So the key idea of the course is, or the way that I think of it is, economics determines what it should be the ideal policy, but what political science does is tell you what's the feasible policy. So, you get a combination of economics of the ideal policy, and I'm going to tell you, well, these things might be ideal, but what is actually feasible? And the way we think about what is feasible is to say, how do we understand political preferences and political behavior, what people do in elections, how public opinion is formed, who they vote for, and how do political institutions work? So, who has veto power? How is coalition bargaining work? How does the difference between parliamentary and presidential systems work? And how does the interaction between political behavior on the one side and political institutions on the other side affect, in combination, explain what kind of policy outcomes are feasible? So to get to that point, I'll introduce you to both to some of the cutting edge research at the intersection of political science and public policy. And we're also going to do some interesting practical things and practical assignments. So, for example, you get to design an experiment, a survey experiment for a political party, and I'll introduce you to some of the methods that political science uses to experimental research in field experiments to understand how public policy plays out in the real world. And you'll be able to design an experiment for a decision maker to test the effectiveness of a particular public policy. We'll also have a final assignment where you'll be a briefing for a minister, where you have to propose a strategy for securing political support for a particular change to an existing policy that you're interested in. Finally, on the course, we're going to have a very interesting day, because we have a session on the course the day after the US presidential election. The election is going to be on the 5th of November. We have a session of the course actually on the 6th of November. And so we're going to have a discussion about what explains the particular outcome of that election and what might be the policy consequences of that election using what we've learned on the course. So let me leave it at that, and I'm happy to come back if you have questions for me afterwards. Thanks. Can't hear you, George. You're muted, I think, George.
All right, it seems that I was muted. Sorry for the technical glitch. I was asking Simon if I can be in that course the day after the US presidential election. If you have any questions for Simon, please write them in the chat about the applied political science part of the core modules. Now let's move to economics. This is the course in Economics for Policy, and I'll pass on the floor to Maria Demertzis. Maria.
Yeah, thanks very much, George, and delighted to be here and give a little bit more information about the course Economics for Policymakers. And it is also virtually following very nicely for what Simon said earlier on. So there are tremendous synergies between the courses. As the title suggests, it is really a module for those who work in policy environments, as indeed it is all of the course, where we learn the basic economic principles, but also importantly, how to apply them. So it is very much about, as much actually about the topics as it is about the tools that you can use in order to design, first and foremost, the questions that need to be asked, the questions that are of policy relevance, and then important also have the methodology, have the approach to be able to lead to an answer that is well-founded. We are going to discuss a number of high-level topics in the policy sphere, and they will be topics that pertain to fiscal policy, monetary policy, and more general economic policy and growth. On the fiscal policy side, we are going to see the questions that are really of the most great importance in this subject: how to allocate budgets, how to understand where revenues come from, and indeed the types of dilemmas that relate to the different sources of raising revenue. So, for example, where if you are a policymaker that is in control of a budget, how do you increase that budget? Do you tax and maybe risk becoming unpopular from a political point of view, or do you borrow, but then by borrowing effectively you pass the burden to next generations? These are real life dilemmas that policymakers have to answer, have to deal with when they talk about budgets. On the monetary policy side, we are going to first and foremost understand the time value of money, that is the interest rate, the types of instruments that policymakers have at their disposal to help stabilize the value of money, and how their actions feed into the rest of the economy. And of course, we are going to talk about purchasing power, the purchasing power of money, inflation, in other words, a concept that has kept us very busy in the past few years. Last, we're going to talk about general economic policy. How does one promote productivity? How does one think about competitiveness in a global, interconnected world? And what are the main ingredients for sustainable growth? In all subjects, we will do active exercises which are based on real-time data that you will be asked to source from the plethora of data sets that exist out there. We will talk about how this data fit to current debates, why certain decisions are taken, and what constitutes a good economic advice. You will hear from very deep policy experience what might have worked in the past and what might have not. And really our aim here is all along the way to bring current debates in the classroom and expect you to contribute to these debates, applying some of the tools that we will have learned. There will, of course, be assignments also based on data and on real understanding, on real posing of questions that are policy relevant, and, of course, of providing solutions to that. I will stop here and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Maria. This is a course that will be taught by Maria Demertzis, by myself and a number of other colleagues who all have experience in policymaking, and it's therefore very much hands-on and granular in different policy areas in economics. All right, we're now moving to the third core course. This is called Business and Government, and that's co-taught by two of our professors, Kristin Fabbe and Kenneth Amaeshi. Kristin, you go first.
Great. Well, thank you, George, and thanks to my co-colleagues here. I think the key word of synergies is the correct one, because as you'll see, this course on business and government also builds very nicely from the previous two courses that you heard about. So the course that I'll be teaching with my esteemed colleague, Professor Amaeshi, is a course that really focuses on the relationship between business and government. And it builds on over 8 years of experience that I had teaching on this topic previously, and also consulting for both governments and businesses more globally. And the premises of the course is that effectively public policy leaders and business leaders alike need to understand one another and how they can work together both domestically and and an increasingly globalized world. This means tackling key challenges, whether that challenge be climate change, social inclusiveness, development. And so the course will take you through kind of varieties of capitalist systems, thinking about how different governments institute development models and leverage the private sector to bring development and growth to their home countries, and also how business and government sometimes partner and sometimes conflict when it comes to key challenges in the domestic and the global sphere. And in my particular section of the course, I'm going to lead you through what I call the development of ideas around how business builds contextual intelligence about the environments in which they operate. And there we're going to go through a series of real-life case studies, and I'm going to provide you with a toolkit of indicators and frameworks that businesses typically use when they look at an operating environment and how they might engage with the public sector or a domestic government. And there we'll go through cases that are global in scope and real-world cases that will be brought to life in the classroom through that teaching experience. And then the section part of the course that I'll be taking responsibility for is what I call resilience and rupture. So what are the situations in which businesses and governments face issues of rupture? So that might be an issue of political risk. It might be an issue of global risk. How do businesses view these particular sets of circumstances? And here we're going to be looking at some really interesting real life cases. One of an electricity company seeking to harness both inclusive practices to deliver electricity in a global market, but in a very conflictual environment. We're also going to look at a contentious case of a startup that has been sanctioned and how that startup should think about evolving or shutting down. And then finally, we're going to look at some really great cases from the global south about how businesses and governments have partnered together to solve key challenges around issues such as upskilling and education, and then finally delivering food security to the global south more generally. So I will leave it at that and turn it over to my colleague, Professor Amaeshi, who's going to be joining me in this course. Kenneth, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you. And hello, everyone. So we started from economics through politics, now to government. From the business side of it, I've been doing this in my previous careers. I've also had practical experience work with companies. So in this session, we'll be looking at the role of the private sector in governance, how the private sector can collaborate with government, but the private sector also can be part of the problem. So the businesses are good, but they can also be the source of the problems. So we want to look at businesses critically, look at the purpose of business, why do we have businesses, and also the reach of businesses, because businesses have become very global and they can do certain things we don't like. But businesses also can, especially when they're operating in weak institutional context or where you have limited statehood, they can overreach themselves. Some businesses, as we know, are richer than some countries. How do we understand power, the power of business? How do we govern businesses and the externalities? And the role of businesses also in setting their private standards, the conversation around corporate social responsibility, ESG, environmental, social, and governance risks, the role of capital markets, and in the broader sense, the movement or the interest in sustainability. So what does corporate sustainability mean in different contexts, in developed economies, in emerging markets? And that way we can contextualize what businesses do and the role they can play in governance. But this role needs to be in collaboration with the government on one hand. It can also be with civil society organizations. So, but it's basically looking at how businesses can be a force for good in society and how they can be managed well to align with policy interests. So thank you, and pass over to George.
Thanks very much, both. This is a great course that is taught by two people who bring in two very complementary backgrounds. Kristin with her background from Harvard Business School and teaching case studies, and Kenneth with his background on sustainable finance and role in business. So let me now pass to the final of the four core courses. This is a course taught by Tommaso Nannicini, a professor of political economy on big and smart data analytics. Tommaso.
Thanks, George. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining our presentation and conversation. Why a core module on data analytics? Well, data, especially big data, are everywhere. Our consumption, our vote, our work, even our social relations are influenced by data, by algorithms based on data analytics. For future policy leaders, it's key to master the intuition behind data analytics, and this is what we are going to do. This is not a course in statistics, it's a course about the intuition, the framework, and how you can build a way of reasoning that foster evidence-based policy making. So we look at the potential and limitation of big data, why big data most of the time are useful to make prediction, and it's good to predict the future sometimes if you can, but also why they can be misleading and they have a lot of limitation. And that's why we'll discuss what I like to call smart data, data based on a clear theoretical design, and data that can be used to do what as human beings we tend to do since we are born, to distinguish the cause and the effect of phenomena. So we'll analyze smart data to distinguish the cause and the effect of social phenomena. And in this discussion about big and smart data, we'll always base our analysis on examples, on case studies of policy evaluations. I mean, I will bring to this course not only my expertise as an applied econometrician, but also the fire and ashes of my past attempts to do evidence-based policymaking as a policymaker in Italy. And so we'll discuss a lot examples of policy evaluation and evidence-based policy design. This is also what I will ask you to do in our discussion to design an optimal policy evaluation applied to a real case. I mean, to be concrete and to conclude my short presentation, I don't think policymakers and public sector leaders need to produce themselves sophisticated data analysis, but for sure they must be able to distinguish good data analysis from bad data analysis. And this is what this course is about. I hope to see you in our virtual classroom.
Thank you very much, Tommaso, and thank you all for this presentation of what we think are 4 very exciting courses that form the core syllabus of our Executive Masters. A reminder that 15th May is the deadline for applications for those of you that are considering to apply. And now we have time for some questions from you. So I'll turn it over to Gaia, who has been collecting questions.
Yes, thank you, George, and thank you to all our speakers for your time and the very interesting presentation you gave today. There's a first very important question, which is, I'm not sure who should answer this, maybe you, George. Could you give more details regarding the ratio between practice and theory of the different courses? Are the core modules the ones that should be focused on theory, while the others will be more hands-on with practical cases, examples, assignment, where I assume the other ones are the electives, I guess?
Thanks for this question. It's a very important one because it goes to the heart of how we've designed this degree. And I'll try and give an answer. And if, of course, any of my colleagues want to come in, please do so. It's not the case that we have some courses that are theory and others that are in practice. No, in fact, the way we've designed every single course is to blend theory and practice. We bring you the theoretical underpinnings that you need to understand how real policy works in individual cases, in individual issues. So whether we're talking about economics, whether we're talking about political science, whether we're talking about data, or the relation between business and government, just to go to the 4 topics that we've discussed today, or if we go to the electives, and we're looking at energy regulation or AI and government, we bring a theoretical framework, a conceptual framework that helps you then understand, assess, analyze, and be able to sift between different policy options and evaluate policy, real policy that is happening at the moment. So this is in terms of both the way that, first of all, the background of the people that will be teaching you, who have this combination of academic expertise and practical policymaking, but it also has to do with how we teach the course in terms of a combination of readings, practical sessions, data-driven, where the course has an element of data, exercises, and group work. So that's how we structure, and that's how we try to combine the two. I hope I've answered that.
Thanks, George. A second question, more general about the program and how we link our courses and activities to the participants' professional role. So the question is, how much, if any, will there be a connection to our current job, organization, institution beyond the final capstone project?
So the connection is twofold. One, it is indeed through the capstone, and the capstone is an important part because the capstone, the proposal for a capstone should be tailored on the organization from which you come and to which you were going to go back, if indeed you're attached to an organization at the time when you're applying. So in terms of the question that you're going to be asking, the methodology, it will be important for you to be able to take that knowledge back, and for the organization, especially in cases where organizations are sponsoring you, to be able to bring back to the organization that element. But also, in terms of the specialization track that you will choose to follow and the courses that you will choose, that this would be tailored around the topics that are relevant to your organization. Now, having said that, this is the design of the degree is such that has a very flexible approach where you tailor to your needs. And if you want to, despite the fact that you work for a particular organization that works in a given area, if you want to use this educational opportunity to broaden your horizons and go into other areas, that you're completely free to do so.
Thanks. There's another very interesting question about our guest speakers. So will they only be coming from the European area, or will we have global guest speakers invited to the different courses?
So different courses have indeed various guest speakers, and these come from a network that we have built over many years, all of us. All of the people that you see, that you've heard from today, have a global network of both academics and policy practitioners that we talk to. So we draw on this global network and we bring in people, and these are not just from Europe. We are a European school, but with a global vocation. So we're approaching these issues from a perspective that transcends Europe, and that's the whole point of being in a school of transnational governance, and therefore a lot of our guest speakers will be from outside the EU.
There's then one more question also related mostly to the capstone project, but we can take it anyway. And is the capstone project expected to be aligned to where we're coming from? That is, will we have together approval or direct support in case there is a strategy towards follow-ups or expected impact through where we're coming from, professionally speaking?
Well, that will really depend on what kind of conditions. If you're funded, for example, from a particular organization or a company, then maybe your funding will depend on the company deciding that they want to tailor the capstone to particular needs, at which point this is an agreement between you and the company. From our side, we will help you find a topic that fits best to your interests. And if indeed you are sponsored by a particular organization, we can also talk to the organization and together develop a learning path and topic and questions that are relevant to them. But you are our student, the organization is not. So our main conversation is with you, your needs, your educational needs, your interests, where you want to go afterwards, and how taking this degree is going to help you grow professionally, how it's going to help you build a network of people with similar interests, and how it's going to help you to develop new interests if you want to explore particular new areas. And I think we have come to the end. Thank you very much to our 5 professors who gave us a short, but I think very informative bird's eye view of the courses that make up the core part of the syllabus. Thank you to all of you for having joined us in this webinar. Those of you that have already applied and have been accepted and joined to have more information, we're looking forward to seeing you in September. Those of you that are still interested in our executive masters, deadline is 15th of May. We're happy to answer any particular questions that you may have, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Thanks all very much.